The agenda for this video is to see the blanket purchase order functionality in NetSuite. We'll start with the creation of a blanket purchase order. Then we'll add items to that blanket purchase order. Step number 3 will be to define the delivery schedule that is applicable to that purchase order. The last step will be to release one or multiple purchase order lines to receive the deliveries that are planned as part of the blanket purchase order. We'll be logging into NetSuite by using a web browser and by navigating to www.netsuite.com URL. And that'll bring us to this login screen. Over here I'll be using my credentials to log in. My username and password have been entered here. And that brings us to the NetSuite dashboard. As you can see, I've logged in to the purchasing and inventory manager's role for this video. And this role has been given access to all the procurement to pay as well as inventory related functionality. The first thing that you can notice is that the dashboard has been customized for this particular user. I'm using this layout with 3 columns. The first column has reminders, KPI meters, some trend related graphs. The middle column has KPIs, navigation portlets, so on and so forth. And the third column has inventory trend, shortcuts, so on and so forth. Every user may customize it based on whatever his requirements may be, whichever functionality he uses on a regular basis, and what functionality or what data he wants to see when he logs into the application first time. Since this is the inventory manager's role, he also has access to some drop-down menus which are specific to his role, some activities, shipping related functionality, receiving inventory reports, and so on and so forth. A different role will have different menus to be accessed. And role-based functionality is a security feature in NetSuite where you can restrict which roles have access to which kind of data and who accesses which transactions, so on and so forth. Every organization may define their own definition of a role, and they can define which functionality each role has access to. As of now, these are the roles that I have access to in this organization, and our functionality today will be based on the inventory manager's role. In this video, we're going to see the functionality of blanket purchase orders in NetSuite. And for that, we've logged into the inventory manager, purchase manager's role in NetSuite. We're going to use the navigation portlet to navigate to the blanket purchase order option. I'll open it in a new tab. Once the screen is open, you can see there are some previously created blanket purchase orders listed here. To create a blanket purchase order, I can click on new transaction here, and this screen opens where you can enter the new details of the blanket purchase order. I'll give it a new name. So this becomes a blanket purchase order ID. I have to mention the vendor's name over here. I'm going to select American Computers. The date here represents the date on which the blanket purchase order was created. There's some additional information that can be included as employee who has created this blanket purchase order, so on and so forth. I can also select the start date, the date on which this blanket purchase order becomes effective, and the end date. I'm going to select June 30th. So this blanket purchase order remains valid for the next 6 months, starting today, which is 3rd of January, until 30th of June. Any additional information that you want to include as part of this purchase order can be added here. A memo, which is a free text field where you can add any description or any additional information. The location for which this blanket purchase order is valid. Some department and classifications that can be selected for reporting purposes later on. Any document date or import permit number that might be valid for this purchase order as well can be stated here. And then we can proceed to add the items which will be covered under this blanket purchase order. So under the items tab over here, I'm going into the items tab here and selecting an item. As you can see, the description and quantity and rate have been pulled from the item master over here. And I'm going to edit the quantity that we are going to order as part of this purchase order. Let's say a quantity of 1000. and I can also define a schedule. A schedule is basically an incremental delivery from the vendor that you might be expecting as part of this blanket purchase order. You can either manually enter the dates on which you're expecting a delivery. So for example, if I at 31st of January 200 units, and then another delivery in March of 400 units, another delivery in, let's say, June for another 400 units. Now this could be based on your production plan, your sales plan, whatever it is, and this can be saved. Another option might be to auto-generate a delivery schedule. So you can expect a weekly schedule from your vendor for the next 6 months, starting today and ending on 30th June. And I can auto-generate the deliveries, and the system will automatically generate the deliveries that you can expect from the vendor for the next 6 months on a weekly basis. And the quantity gets divided equally for all these deliveries. Or I can choose a monthly delivery where the delivery gets split per month, or a quarterly delivery which splits the delivery every quarter. Right? For our example here, I'm going to use the monthly option. Another option you can see here is the create purchase orders option, which is either manual or at lead time. What this does is, if you've selected manually, your blanket purchase order can be converted into actual purchase orders manually, one by one. Or if I select at lead time, the system automatically creates purchase orders based on the lead time of the items that you've defined under the purchase order. We'll show you the manual option in this video, and I'll select manually over here and click on OK. Now that we've added this information, I'm going to click on add here on this line so that the line becomes effective, and then I can save the blanket purchase order. As you can see, now the blanket purchase order has been saved. We've got a confirmation. And this blanket purchase order, you can view the detail of the schedule that we've created by clicking on this button. You can see that there are 6 deliveries expected of 167 quantity each. The last will be just the remaining quantity that adds up to 1000. Since we selected manual creation of purchase orders against this blanket purchase orders, we can now see how we can create purchase orders manually from this blanket purchase order. For that, I will click on edit, and under the schedule I can click on the pencil here, and I can select which orders I want to release into actual purchase orders. So these 2 deliveries on the 3rd of January as well as the 3rd of February I've selected for release. I'm going to click OK here. Click on OK here as well and save. And I've got a confirmation saying transaction saved successfully. What the system has done in the background is, for the 2 deliveries that I released manually, the system has created actual purchase orders in the system, numbers 13535 and 13536. We can also manually open these purchase orders and see the details in there. So if you look at the PO date on these 2 purchase orders, 13536 was released with the PO date of 2nd of March. This is 3rd of February. And a purchase order 13535 which was released with the PO date of 3rd of January. So we released 2 of the deliveries from the blanket purchase order, and they've been converted to actual purchase orders with the respective receipt dates. If we go back to the original blanket purchase order on this tab. You can also see the relationship of this blanket purchase order against the purchase orders that were just created by clicking on this tab, related transactions. You can see there are 2 purchase orders that were created, which are corresponding to these 13536 and 13535. Going back to the original blanket purchase order, and as and when you can expect deliveries for the remaining scheduled deliveries from the vendor, you can release them manually, and purchase orders will be created for receipt into the corresponding warehouses as required. If I had selected automatic generation of purchase order instead of manual, then what would happen is, based on the item's lead time, so let's say if the item has a lead time of 15 days and the delivery is scheduled on 1st of March, then the purchase order would be automatically released on, let's say, the 12th or the 13th of February, so that it can be available for receipt in the warehouse. There would be no manual release of purchase orders in that case. And if we go into individual purchase orders, you can also see that there's an option to select the purchase contract. So if your purchase order has been released as part of a blanket purchase order, but you still want to apply a purchase contract for that purchase order, you can edit the purchase order, go to the line, click on purchase contract, and then select the purchase contract which you want to apply for this purchase order. You can also click on OK and save it. The cost of the line also gets updated as you selected the purchase contract which is applicable to that line. I'll save this purchase order. For this purchase order to be saved, a location is mandatory. I'm going to select US East DC for our example and save it. The PO has now been saved successfully. And to compare between the 2 purchase orders that we released, for this purchase order we have applied the purchase contract. Purchase contract is here, purchase contract PC004, and the effective cost that we're going to pay per unit is 240. However, in the other purchase order we have not applied the purchase contract, so the cost per unit is 250. And that concludes the functionality of using blanket purchase orders with purchase orders and linking them with purchase contracts in NetSuite.